By the time I came home with 2 bags of groceries, my key no longer fit the front door. I tried once, twice, a third time. Nothing. The lock had been changed. Through the stained glass window, I could see my daughter-in-law standing in the foyer with her arms folded. She wasn't surprised to see me. She'd been waiting. She opened the door just enough to keep the security chain latched. I was hoping you'd understand without making a scene. I looked past her. My favorite rocking chair was already sitting on the front porch. 2 cardboard boxes rested beside it. My winter coat had been tossed on top. The herbs I'd planted with my grandson every spring were still visible behind the garden fence. Everything else had been locked away from me. "Tessa," I said quietly, "you changed the locks?" She smiled the way people smile when they've already convinced themselves they're right. "You don't live here anymore." Before I could answer, a small face appeared behind her. Noah, my 13-year-old grandson. His eyes were red. He gripped the staircase railing so tightly, his knuckles had turned white. He whispered just loudly enough for me to hear. "Grandma, Dad said this house belongs to us now." My heart didn't break. It became perfectly still. Because in that moment, I realized something. The biggest lie in this family wasn't that I'd lost my lottery money. It was that I'd spent 7 years protecting people who had already decided they deserved everything I owned. I looked at my grandson and smiled. "It's okay, sweetheart." Then I looked back at Tessa. "I'll leave." She blinked. No argument, no tears, no begging. Just those 2 words. "I'll leave." She thought she'd won. She had no idea that 7 years earlier, on the same afternoon, I claimed an $11 million lottery prize. I'd signed one document that would decide exactly how this day ended. And no one in that house, not even my own son, knew it existed. 7 years earlier, I almost threw away the winning ticket. The printer at the gas station had smeared one of the numbers. I figured the machine had made a mistake. The cashier laughed. "You should check it anyway." I did. 3 days later, every television station in the state knew my name. Grace Bennett, 60 years old, school cafeteria manager, widow. Winner of the largest lottery jackpot in state history. People always imagine that kind of money feels like freedom. It doesn't. At least not at first. It feels like someone quietly painted a target on your back. The cameras disappeared after 2 weeks. The phone calls didn't. Distant cousins suddenly remembered my birthday. Former coworkers wanted investment opportunities. A church I'd never attended invited me to become an honorary donor. Even strangers stopped me in grocery stores. Most of them didn't ask how I was. They asked what I planned to buy. That was the week I met Evelyn Brooks. She wasn't a financial advisor. She was a former estate attorney hired by the Lottery Commission to warn winners about something most people never considered. "The biggest danger isn't taxes," she told me. "It isn't bad investments. It's believing the people you love will never change." I laughed. "My son would never treat me differently." She smiled sadly. "I hope you're right." Then she slid a folder across the table. "Just in case." Inside was a trust agreement unlike anything I'd ever seen. One sentence caught my attention immediately. Assets placed inside this trust remain inaccessible to any beneficiary who attempts to obtain them through coercion, intimidation, fraud, or undue influence. I frowned. Does that actually happen? Evelyn didn't answer immediately. Instead, she opened another folder. Newspaper articles, court records, families torn apart after lottery wins, children suing parents, parents suing children, brothers who hadn't spoken in 20 years over money they'd never earned. Then she quietly said something I never forgot. Money doesn't create greed. It reveals where it was hiding. I signed the trust that afternoon. Not because I expected to use it, because I prayed I never would. My son Michael cried when I handed him the keys to the river house. "Mom, I can't believe this." He hugged me so hard I could barely breathe. Tessa cried too. She kept walking from room to room. The fireplace, the kitchen, the river. It's perfect. I told them the house belonged to a family investment company I'd created after retirement. That wasn't a lie. The company existed. I simply never told them I owned every share. "We'll pay rent," Michael insisted. I shook my head. "No. You save your money. Raise Noah. Make this your home." He promised he'd never forget my kindness. I believed him. For a while, he didn't. The first year was wonderful. Sunday dinners, birthday parties, Noah chasing fireflies in the backyard, Michael grilling burgers by the river. Sometimes I'd watch them through the kitchen window and think, this is exactly what your father would have wanted. Then little things began to change. Not arguments, questions. Harmless questions. How much of the lottery money is left? Did you invest it? Who manages the company? What happens to the house when you're gone? I answered the same way every time. Everything is already taken care of. Michael accepted that answer. Tessa didn't. She always asked one more question. Always. One afternoon, she watched me unload groceries from my 10-year-old sedan. "You still drive this thing?" "It runs." "But you could buy anything." "I already have everything I need." She looked at me strangely. "I don't think I'll ever understand people like you." I smiled. "What people?" "The kind who have millions and live like they're broke." I laughed. "No, Tessa. I live like someone who remembers what it felt like to have nothing." She laughed too, but there wasn't much humor in it. Later that evening, I walked past the upstairs hallway and heard voices drifting through the partially open office door. Tessa and Michael. "You really believe she's almost out of money?" Michael sighed. "I don't know." "Then why won't she tell us how much is left?" "Because it's her money." There was a long silence. Then Tessa spoke again, quietly. "So we're just supposed to wait until she dies and hope there's something left?" I froze. Neither of them knew I was standing in the hallway. Michael didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't know." That answer hurt far more than if he'd simply agreed with her, because it told me the question no longer sounded impossible to him. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I walked downstairs for tea. As I passed the dining room, I noticed light spilling from beneath the study door. Someone was inside. I stepped closer. The door was slightly open. Tessa sat at the computer, scrolling through county property records. Michael stood behind her. "What if it's under another company?" she whispered. "We'll find it." My heart skipped. Find what? Then Tessa clicked another website. Probate records, inheritance law, property ownership. Michael finally spoke. "If Mom still owns everything, we should know before it's too late." Tessa nodded. "Exactly. We need to protect what's going to be yours." I quietly stepped away before the floorboards could creak. Back in my room, I opened the small fireproof safe hidden beneath the closet floor. Inside lay the original trust agreement Evelyn Brooks had prepared 7 years earlier. For the first time since signing it, I read the final paragraph. Then I picked up my phone and called Evelyn. She answered on the second ring. "Grace? It's after midnight." "I know." I looked toward the ceiling where my son and daughter-in-law were still searching public records. Then I quietly asked the question I'd spent 7 years hoping I'd never have to ask. If my own family tries to take the house from me, is it already too late? There was a pause. Then Evelyn answered, with a calmness that chilled me. "No." "But if they're looking tonight?" "They've already taken the first step." And neither of us knew that by the end of the following week, Michael wouldn't just be searching for ownership. He would be secretly meeting with an attorney to prove that his own mother was no longer mentally competent to manage her fortune. For the next 6 months, I pretended nothing had changed. I still baked Noah's favorite cinnamon bread every Saturday. I still watered the herb garden before sunrise. I still thanked Tessa whenever she cooked dinner. If she was watching me, I wanted her to believe she'd fooled me. Because the moment people think you've stopped paying attention, they stop hiding who they really are. 3 weeks after my midnight phone call, Evelyn invited me to her office. She didn't waste time. "I've reviewed your trust. And? It will protect your assets." I nodded. I wasn't worried about the money. She looked at me over her glasses. "I know. You're worried about your son." I lowered my eyes. "I still think he'll come to his senses." Evelyn sighed. "Grace, I've represented families for 35 years. The people who lose everything usually don't start with lawsuits. They start with small justifications." She slid a yellow legal pad toward me. Across the top, she'd written, "How does someone convince themselves they deserve something they never earned?" Below it, a list. They tell themselves it was always meant to be theirs. They begin calling gifts promises. They stop asking permission. Eventually, they stop seeing the owner. Only the property. I stared at those words for a long time, because without realizing it, Michael and Tessa had already reached the third line. The first real warning came a month later. I returned from the garden and found 3 contractors measuring the backyard. One carried blueprints, another was marking the patio with bright orange paint. I walked over. "Can I help you?" The foreman smiled. "We're here for the outdoor kitchen." "The what?" He unfolded the plans. Stone counters, pizza oven, pergola. Estimated cost, $180,000. I looked at the work order. The client wasn't Michael. It wasn't Tessa. It was my property company. I felt my stomach tighten. "I'm sorry. There must be a mistake." The foreman frowned. Mrs. Tessa Bennett approved everything yesterday. I have her signature. I calmly asked to see it. The signature wasn't mine, but underneath it, someone had written, Authorized Family Representative. That evening, I placed the proposal on the dining table. Michael looked surprised. Tessa, what is this? She didn't even flinch. It's an investment. It's not an investment. It's our backyard. I corrected her gently. It's my backyard. Silence. Tessa leaned back. Grace, you keep saying my like we're strangers. We're family. I know. That's exactly why I expected you to ask first. Michael tried to smooth things over. We were going to tell you. When? After everything was finalized. I smiled sadly. So, after there was nothing left for me to decide. Neither of them answered. The contractors never returned, but something else changed. The next week, packages began arriving almost every day. Luxury patio furniture, designer lighting, imported kitchen fixtures. Every invoice listed my property company. Every delivery required my approval. Every order had been placed by Tessa. When I canceled them, she became furious. You embarrassed me! In front of whom? The suppliers. I looked at her quietly. They should be embarrassed. They accepted six-figure orders from someone who doesn't own the property. Michael rubbed his forehead. You didn't have to cancel everything. I absolutely did. A few days later, Noah knocked softly on my bedroom door. Grandma, can I ask you something? Always. He sat beside me. Dad says one day this house will be mine. I smiled. Maybe. His forehead wrinkled. Mom says it'll happen sooner if you move into one of those retirement villages. The room suddenly felt colder. What did she call it? A senior community. They said people your age shouldn't have to take care of such a big place. He hesitated. Grandma, are they trying to make you leave? Children ask questions adults are too afraid to answer. I reached over and squeezed his hand. What do you think? He looked toward the hallway to make sure no one was listening. Then he whispered, I think Mom keeps talking about the house. More than she talks about you. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what Noah had said. The following morning, I quietly hired a licensed property management company. Not because I needed help, because I wanted independent records. Every repair, every expense, every delivery, every visitor. If anyone ever questioned what happened inside this house, there would be evidence. I still hoped I'd never need it. 3 weeks later, Michael came home unusually excited. I've got great news. He placed a glossy folder on the table. Inside were brochures for a luxury senior living community overlooking a lake. Tessa smiled brightly. They have gardening clubs, art classes, private nurses. You'd love it. I looked from one face to the other. Neither seemed nervous. They'd rehearsed this. You've already visited? Michael nodded. We thought we'd surprise you. I see. And when exactly was I planning to move? They exchanged a quick glance. Tessa answered, Whenever you're ready. I closed the brochure. I'm not. Silence. Then Michael tried again. "You've always said you didn't need such a big house." "I don't. But I enjoy living in it. This place is hard to maintain. So hire gardeners. We're thinking about your future." I smiled. "No. You're thinking about yours." For nearly 10 seconds, nobody spoke. Then Tessa laughed, not kindly. The sound was sharp, almost mocking. "You really think we'd throw you out?" I met her eyes. "I think you've imagined living here without me more times than you've imagined growing old with me." Her smile disappeared. That evening, after everyone went upstairs, my phone vibrated. It was a notification from the county recorder's office. Months earlier, Evelyn had encouraged me to activate title alerts on every property connected to my trust. Most people never needed them. I almost ignored the message. Instead, I opened it. My blood ran cold. Someone had submitted an online inquiry requesting certified ownership documents for the River House. The request itself wasn't illegal, but one detail stood out. The applicant hadn't identified themselves as Michael Bennett or Tessa Bennett. The request had been filed under the name of a law office, Harrison, Cole, and Pierce, one of the most aggressive probate firms in the state. I stared at the screen. Slowly, very slowly. I remembered something Noah had said 3 days earlier. Dad keeps meeting a man in a blue suit after work. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now, I suddenly wondered if that blue suit wasn't a client or a friend, but an attorney. The next morning, I asked Michael where he'd been after work on Tuesday. He answered without hesitation. "Late sales meeting." I nodded. Then I placed my phone on the kitchen table. The title alert was still open. Across the top of the screen, the law firm's name glowed in bold letters. I watched my son's face carefully. For less than a second, his expression froze. Then he smiled. "I've never heard of them." It was a convincing lie. Too convincing. Because at that exact moment, I realized something far more frightening than greed. My son had finally become comfortable lying to my face, and I had no idea how much farther he was willing to go. I didn't confront Michael. Not yet. When someone lies once, they'll usually lie again. If you stay quiet long enough, they'll eventually tell you everything without realizing it. So I smiled, finished my coffee, and pretended I'd believed him. "I must have misunderstood the notification." Michael relaxed immediately. "Probably." Across the table, Tessa never touched her coffee. She was watching me, not the conversation. Me, trying to decide whether I'd become suspicious. Good. Let her wonder. The next morning, I drove to Evelyn's office. She'd already printed the title inquiry before I arrived. The request wasn't random. She slid the document across the desk. They asked for certified ownership history. I frowned. Why would they need that? There are only 3 reasons. She held up one finger. To challenge ownership, a second. To prepare probate, a third. Or to convince a court someone else should control the property. I stared at her. You mean guardianship? She nodded slowly. I hope I'm wrong. That afternoon, I made a decision I'd avoided for 7 years. I hired a private investigator. His name was Daniel Ross, former financial crimes detective. Quiet, patient. The kind of man who noticed details other people ignored. "I don't want dirt," I told him. "I want the truth." He smiled faintly. The truth usually comes with dirt. 3 days later, Daniel called. "I think you should see this yourself." He handed me a folder. Inside were photographs. Michael. Leaving work early. Not once. 5 different times. Always meeting the same man. Blue suit. Leather briefcase. Exactly as Noah had described. Another photograph. The man handing Michael a thick folder. Another. Michael entering Harrison, Cole, and Pierce. Not through the front entrance. Through the private side entrance reserved for scheduled legal consultations. He'd lied. Twice. Daniel opened another file. This is the interesting part. He slid over copies of parking garage records. Michael met the lawyer every Thursday for nearly 2 months. Same time, same location, same conference room. I looked up. "Can you find out what they're discussing?" Daniel hesitated. "Not legally." But, he smiled. "People talk." 48 hours later, he called again. "This isn't about inheritance." "What is it?" "They're preparing a competency petition." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "A what?" "They intend to ask a judge to declare you mentally incapable of managing your finances." Silence. Then Daniel quietly added, "Once that happens, someone else manages everything." "My son?" "Most likely." I drove home in complete silence. Halfway there, I pulled into a church parking lot, not because I needed to pray, because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. The humiliation hurt. The greed hurt. But this was different. Michael wasn't waiting for me to die anymore. He was trying to erase me while I was still alive. That evening, everything suddenly made sense. The retirement brochures, the financial advisor, the questions about my accounts, the title search, even the expensive renovations. None of it had been impulsive. It was a plan. A careful, patient, legal plan. And someone had designed it long before the locks ever changed. I said nothing. Instead, I became the woman they'd been pretending I was. Forgetful, distracted, confused. I deliberately left my reading glasses in the refrigerator. I asked Michael the same question twice. I mixed up Tuesday and Thursday. When Tessa corrected me, I apologized. Every time. Daniel frowned when I told him. "You know they're documenting this." "I know." "They'll use it against you." I smiled. "Only if they think it's real." For the next month, I watched them. They became bolder. Tessa started finishing my sentences, correcting me in front of Noah. "Oh, Grace forgets things now." "It's just her age." Michael began taking over small decisions. "I'll handle the insurance. I'll call the plumber. I'll pay that invoice." Each favor quietly removed another piece of my independence, exactly as Evelyn had predicted. Small justifications. Then came the first real mistake. One Saturday morning, I returned from the farmer's market an hour earlier than expected. The house was unusually quiet. Noah was at a friend's birthday party. I walked toward the study. The door was almost closed. Inside, Michael and Tessa weren't alone. The man in the blue suit sat across from them, Attorney Stephen Cole. I recognized him from Daniel's photographs. "The judge will want medical documentation," Stephen said calmly. Tessa nodded. "We're arranging that." Michael looked uneasy. "What if Mom refuses an evaluation?" Stephen smiled. "Then we'll ask the court to order one." "And if she fights us?" "You'll tell the court she's paranoid." Tessa laughed softly. "That part won't be difficult." My fingers tightened around the grocery bag. Stephen continued. "The important thing is perception. Never argue. Always appear concerned. If she becomes emotional, that's evidence. If she gets angry, that's evidence. If she accuses either of you of trying to steal the house, that also becomes evidence." Michael swallowed. "I don't want to hurt her." Stephen leaned forward. "You're not hurting her. You're protecting her." I had heard enough. Quietly, I stepped back into the hallway. Not a single floorboard creaked. That night, Michael knocked on my bedroom door. "You okay, Mom?" I looked up from my knitting. "I'm fine." "You seem tired." "I suppose I'm getting older." His expression softened. Or perhaps he wanted it to soften. "You know, if life ever becomes too much, you can always let me take care of things." I smiled. "That's sweet." He smiled back. For just a moment, I saw the little boy who used to hold my hand crossing the street. Then he asked the question that destroyed the memory. "Have you ever considered adding my name to the property company?" I looked directly into his eyes. "No." His smile disappeared. Only for a second, but I saw it. The disappointment, the calculation, the impatience. He kissed my forehead. "Sleep well." As soon as he left, I locked the bedroom door. Then I reached beneath the bed and pulled out the old metal lockbox that hadn't been opened in 7 years. Inside, beneath the trust documents, was another sealed envelope. One Evelyn had insisted I never open, unless someone in my own family tried to have me declared mentally incompetent. Across the front, written in her handwriting, were 8 words that suddenly felt terrifying. "Open only after they make the first legal move." The next morning, a courier arrived at the front door. He asked for Grace Bennett, then handed me a certified envelope from the county courthouse. I looked at the return address. My hands became perfectly still. Because before I'd even broken the seal, I already knew exactly what was inside. The envelope wasn't thick, only 12 pages. Yet it weighed more than the $11 million lottery check I'd held 7 years earlier. Across the top of the first page were 5 words that made my pulse slow instead of race. Petition for emergency guardianship. Petitioner, Michael Bennett. Co-petitioner, Tessa Bennett. Reason, progressive cognitive decline resulting in financial vulnerability. I smiled, not because it was funny, because they'd finally crossed the one line Evelyn told me they must never cross. The trust was no longer waiting. It was awake. I called Evelyn before I read another page. I received it. Her voice remained calm. So they filed. Yes. Good. I blinked. Good? They've committed themselves. What does that mean? It means every lie now belongs to the court. She paused. And courts don't care about family stories. They care about evidence. An hour later, Daniel Ross walked into Evelyn's office, carrying another folder. I've got something. He spread photographs across the conference table. Michael entering Harrison, Cole and Pierce. Tessa leaving a private medical clinic. Stephen Cole meeting a neurologist. I frowned. A neurologist? Daniel nodded. I followed the doctor. He wasn't treating you. He was preparing to testify. Evelyn looked up sharply. Expert witness? Daniel nodded again. They've never examined Grace. No. They don't have to. If the judge grants a temporary order, the evaluation comes afterward. I felt sick. They weren't trying to prove I was incapable. They were trying to create just enough doubt to take control first. That evening, I returned home carrying groceries. The atmosphere felt different, too polite. Michael insisted on carrying my bags. Tessa offered to make tea. People only become unusually kind when they need something. During dinner, Michael casually asked, Mom, have you ever forgotten where the bank keeps your accounts? I looked confused. Why would I? No reason. What about passwords? I write them down. Where? I smiled. If I told you, they wouldn't be passwords anymore. Tessa forced a laugh. No one else did. The next morning, Noah skipped breakfast. I found him sitting alone behind the greenhouse. His backpack lay untouched beside him. Everything okay? He nodded, then shook his head. They're lying. I sat beside him. About what? Dad says you're sick. Mom says you don't remember things. He looked directly at me. But every time they tell people that, you remember everything. Children notice patterns adults overlook. I wrapped an arm around his shoulders. Has anyone asked you questions? He nodded. The lawyer. My heartbeat stopped. What lawyer? The man with the blue tie. He asked if you ever forgot my birthday. What did you say? That you remember everyone's birthday. He hesitated. Then Mom got mad. I drove straight to Daniel. He didn't even let me finish. They interviewed Noah? Yes. His expression hardened. They're building witness statements. Against me, using a 13-year-old boy. Daniel immediately picked up his phone. I know someone at Child Protective Services. I want this documented. That afternoon, another surprise arrived. My younger sister, Helen. She hadn't visited in months. She walked through the front door carrying flowers, then hugged me tightly. Grace, why didn't you tell me? Tell you what? That you're getting worse. I stared at her. What? Helen looked genuinely confused. Michael called. He said you've been forgetting names. Leaving the stove on? Wandering at night. I laughed, not because it was amusing, because every story they told grew bigger than the last. I've never left the stove on. Helen frowned. He seemed so worried. I gently took her hand. Come with me. We walked into my downstairs office. I opened a cabinet. Inside sat 23 neatly labeled binders, utility bills, garden schedules, investment reports, property maintenance, medical records, every document arranged by month, by year, by color. Helen looked at them in silence. Then she whispered, "My God." I handed her a notebook. What day did I prune the roses? She flipped through it. March 17th. What fertilizer? Organic blend, 2 pounds. When did Noah lose his first tooth? She turned another page. April 8th. Helen slowly closed the notebook. This isn't someone losing their memory. No, it isn't. She looked at me with tears forming in her eyes. They lied to me. They're lying to everyone. That evening, Helen agreed to stay for dinner. Michael looked surprised. I didn't know you were coming. Helen smiled politely. Neither did I. Dinner was painfully quiet until Helen suddenly asked, "So, when exactly did Grace start forgetting things?" Michael froze. Tessa answered instead. It's been gradual. Helen nodded thoughtfully. Interesting. She remembered the serial number on Dad's fishing boat from 1998 this afternoon. Silence. I couldn't have done that. Michael looked down at his plate. Tessa forced another smile. Dementia isn't always consistent. Helen calmly replied, Neither are liars. The room went completely still. That night, Michael knocked softly on my bedroom door. I need to ask you something. I invited him inside. He looked exhausted. I never wanted this. I said nothing. He sat on the edge of the chair. The lawyer says, if we don't act now, someone could manipulate you. I studied his face. Who? I don't know. You. He looked hurt. You think I'd steal from you? I answered honestly. I think you've convinced yourself it wouldn't be stealing. His eyes filled with frustration. You don't understand. Then help me. He looked away. Finally, he whispered something so quietly I almost missed it. Tessa says, if we don't secure the house now, we'll lose everything. There it was. Not greed. Fear. Borrowed fear. Fed to him day after day until it sounded like his own voice. For one brief moment, I almost reached across the room. Almost told him everything. The trust, the money, the plan. Almost. Then my phone vibrated. A text from Daniel. Only 6 words. Don't tell Michael anything. Read this. Attached was a surveillance photo taken less than 2 hours earlier. Michael wasn't at work. He wasn't with Tessa. He was sitting inside a downtown cafe, across from attorney Stephen Cole. And spread across the table between them was a thick file stamped with the words, Bennett Estate, Revised Will. My breathing stopped, because I had never revised my will, which meant only one thing. Someone was preparing a new one, in my name. For the first time in 7 years, I cried. Not because Michael wanted my house, not because he'd tried to convince a judge I was losing my mind, but because somewhere along the way, my little boy had become a man willing to sign papers that erased his own mother before she was even gone. I stared at the surveillance photograph. The timestamp read, 2:43 p.m. Michael, Attorney Stephen Cole. A folder labeled, Bennett Estate, Revised Will. There was only one problem. I hadn't spoken to any attorney about changing my will. So who had? Daniel arrived 20 minutes later. He spread 3 more photographs across Evelyn's conference table. They weren't discussing your current will. He pointed toward another document. They were drafting a replacement. Evelyn's expression hardened. They're planning to argue that if the guardianship is approved, the court-appointed guardian can petition to replace outdated estate planning. Daniel nodded. And guess who becomes guardian? Neither of us answered. We already knew. Michael. Evelyn quietly closed the folder. They're moving faster than I expected. Can they do it? If the court believes you're incompetent, yes. I looked down at my hands. So I lose my home, my money, and my own voice. Evelyn leaned forward. Only if we let them control the first hearing. She opened a locked drawer. Inside was a second envelope I'd never been allowed to open. Across the front, my own signature appeared beneath hers. I frowned. I don't remember signing this. You did. The day you won the lottery. I told you I'd explain if this day ever came. She slid it toward me. Inside wasn't one document. There were 3. The first was a video statement I had recorded 7 years earlier. I watched myself on the screen. 7 years younger, still wearing the yellow raincoat from the lottery press conference. I looked directly into the camera. If you're watching this, someone I love has tried to convince the court I cannot speak for myself. I felt tears sting my eyes. I had forgotten making this. Evelyn hadn't. The younger version of me continued. My name is Grace Bennett. Today's date is April 17th. I have just claimed the state lottery jackpot. I'm recording this because my attorney advised me that sudden wealth changes families. I don't believe my son would ever betray me. She smiled sadly. But if I'm wrong, I want the court to know something. I chose privacy, not secrecy. I chose boundaries, not fear. And if anyone someday claims those choices prove I was mentally unfit, they're lying. The video ended. The room remained silent. The second document was even more shocking. A notarized psychiatric evaluation, completed 7 years ago. I looked confused. Evelyn, why would I have this? Because I insisted, she answered softly. Lottery winners are frequently accused of irrational behavior by relatives. The evaluation established your baseline. I read the final sentence. No evidence of cognitive impairment, excellent executive function, superior financial judgment. Daniel smiled. They're going to have a difficult time explaining how someone with superior executive function suddenly became incapable, only after refusing to hand over millions. Then Evelyn handed me the third document. This one changed everything. I unfolded it slowly. At first, it looked like another trust amendment. Then I saw the title, Conditional Beneficiary Provision. What is this? Evelyn folded her hands. The clause you insisted on adding. I did? You don't remember because you almost removed it. She pointed toward paragraph 4. I read it once, then again, then a third time. My breathing slowed, because suddenly, everything made sense. 7 years ago, without realizing how important it would become, I'd written one sentence that no one else knew existed. Any named beneficiary who attempts to obtain control of trust assets through coercion, fraud, intimidation, false incapacity claims, forged documents, or abuse of legal process shall immediately and permanently forfeit every direct inheritance under this trust. I looked up. Michael. Evelyn nodded. Triggered it. For several seconds, I couldn't speak. My own son had unknowingly removed himself from my estate, not because I disinherited him, because he had violated the one condition designed to protect me. Daniel broke the silence. There's more. He handed me another envelope. Inside were bank records, credit reports, private loan documents. Michael hadn't just fallen behind on bills. He owed nearly $780,000. Construction investments, personal guarantees, credit lines, home inventory loans. Almost every debt had one signature behind it. Tessa's. Daniel pointed founder 1 transaction. This one caught my attention. A private payment, $25,000, to Harrison, Cole, and Pierce. Retainer fee. Evelyn frowned. They paid $25,000 before filing the guardianship petition. Daniel nodded. And they didn't use their own money. I looked closer. The payment source wasn't Michael or Tessa. It came from an anonymous family trust. No beneficiary listed. No public owner. Just one name. Ashcroft Holdings. I've never heard of them. Daniel's expression changed. I have. They've financed 3 guardianship abuse cases in the last 5 years. Evelyn looked up sharply. You think someone's back in this? I think Michael and Tessa believe they're fighting for a house. He paused. But someone else is fighting for something much bigger. The following morning, the first guardianship hearing began. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined. No cameras, no reporters, just a judge, a court clerk, our attorneys, and my son sitting 10 feet away. Michael couldn't meet my eyes. Tessa could. She smiled, confident, certain, as though she'd already won. Judge Helen Ramirez entered precisely at 9. We're here regarding the petition for emergency guardianship over Mrs. Grace Bennett. Stephen Cole stood first. He spoke for nearly 20 minutes. He described me as forgetful, financially vulnerable, emotionally unstable, unable to recognize manipulation. Every sentence sounded polished. Every sentence painted me as someone who needed saving. Then he called his first witness, Michael Bennett. My son slowly walked toward the witness stand, placed one hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, then looked directly at me. For one brief second, I saw guilt. Then it disappeared. Stephen asked quietly, Mr. Bennett, in your opinion, when did your mother's mental decline begin? Michael took a deep breath, opened his mouth, and before he could answer, the courtroom doors suddenly swung open. Every head turned. A woman I'd never seen before stepped inside, carrying a sealed federal evidence case. She walked straight to the judge. "Your Honor, I apologize for the interruption, but this court is about to hear testimony based on evidence that we now know is incomplete." The judge frowned. "And you are?" The woman handed over her credentials. "My name is Sarah Whitmore, Senior Investigator, Office of the State Attorney General." Then she looked directly at Michael, before saying the one sentence that drained every color from Tessa's face. "We're opening a criminal investigation into the law firm that filed this guardianship petition." The courtroom fell completely silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing. Every pair of eyes followed the woman standing beside the judge's bench. She looked calm, professional, completely unaffected by the tension filling the room. "My name is Sarah Whitmore," she repeated. "Senior Investigator with the Office of the State Attorney General." Judge Ramirez adjusted her glasses. "This is a guardianship hearing, Investigator." It was. Sarah placed a thick evidence binder on the clerk's desk. But over the last 72 hours, it has become something considerably larger. Stephen Cole rose immediately. "Your Honor, I object." "On what grounds?" "This investigation has nothing to do with my client." Sarah turned toward him. "Actually, Mr. Cole, it has everything to do with your client." She opened the binder. 3 months ago, our office began investigating multiple allegations involving fraudulent guardianship petitions filed across this state. Another binder. 5 families. Another. 4 law firms. Then another. 1 financial organization. She looked directly at Stephen. Harrison, Cole, and Pierce. The courtroom became so quiet, I could hear Michael breathing. Sarah continued. "In each case, elderly property owners were declared temporarily incompetent. Their financial authority was transferred. Their estate plans were modified. And within months, millions of dollars changed hands." Judge Ramirez frowned. "Are you alleging criminal conduct?" "I'm stating that we now have probable cause." Stephen tried to interrupt. "My firm has represented hundreds of families." Sarah cut him off. "And we have bank records for every retainer." She held up a document. "The payment made by Michael Bennett and Tessa Bennett did not originate from either of them." My attorney, Evelyn, remained perfectly still. She already knew. Judge Ramirez looked down. "Ashcroft Holdings." Sarah nodded. "Correct. An organization currently under investigation for financing abusive guardianship litigation." Stephen's confidence finally cracked. "You have no proof my clients knew anything about that." Sarah answered calmly. "We're not saying they did." Then she looked toward Michael. "We believe they were being used." Michael slowly stood. "What?" Sarah's voice softened. "Mr. Bennett, did Attorney Cole ever tell you where the $25,000 retainer came from?" Michael looked confused. I thought it was financed through the firm until the estate settled." Sarah nodded. "Exactly." She turned another page. "The contract he signed contained a contingency clause." Michael stared blankly. "What clause?" "The one allowing Ashcroft Holdings to recover legal expenses by acquiring a percentage of recovered estate assets." Silence. Then Sarah quietly added, "If your petition succeeded, your mother's estate wouldn't simply belong to your family. A significant portion would legally belong to them. Michael looked toward Stephen. His face had gone completely pale. You told me this was about protecting Mom. Stephen didn't answer. Michael looked at Tessa. You knew? She hesitated. Only for a second, but that second was enough. You knew? Her voice trembled. I didn't know all of it. You said this was temporary. It was supposed to be. You said once we controlled the company, everything would stay in the family. She couldn't answer, because it wasn't true. Maybe it never had been. Judge Ramirez called a recess. Outside the courtroom, Michael found me sitting quietly beside a window overlooking the courthouse lawn. He looked 10 years older than he had that morning. I'm sorry. I looked out the window. For what? For everything. Which part? His shoulders collapsed. I don't even know anymore. The lies. The petition. The house. The lawyer. The money. I convinced myself I was protecting what Dad would have wanted. I finally looked at him. No. You convinced yourself that fear and love were the same thing. He lowered his head. I never wanted to hurt you. I believe you. His eyes widened. You do? I believe you never wanted to. But eventually, wanting something became more important than asking whether it was right. When court resumed, Judge Ramirez dismissed the emergency petition without prejudice. Then she turned toward the district attorney's office. This court requests immediate review of all evidence submitted today. She looked directly at Stephen Cole, as well as the conduct of every attorney involved. His law license wasn't revoked that afternoon, but before the week ended, the state bar suspended him pending investigation. Months later, Harrison, Cole, and Pierce would close its doors. Ashcroft Holdings disappeared almost overnight. Federal investigators would later uncover dozens of similar cases across 3 states. Michael and Tessa hadn't started a criminal enterprise. They had become useful pieces inside one. That realization didn't erase what they'd done, but it explained why everything had escalated so quickly. 2 weeks later, I asked Michael to meet me at the river house. He arrived alone. The moving truck was already parked outside. I'll leave today, he said quietly. You don't have to ask. I wasn't going to. He looked surprised. I wanted to talk. We sat on the back porch where he'd once taught Noah to skip stones across the river. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, he asked the question he'd probably feared since childhood. Did you cut me out of your will? I answered honestly. No. His eyes filled with hope. Then I continued. You did. He frowned. I don't understand. I removed a single sheet of paper from my folder. The conditional beneficiary provision. The clause he'd unknowingly triggered. He read it once, then again. By the 3rd time, his hands were shaking. So, I forfeited everything. I nodded. You didn't lose your inheritance because I stopped loving you. You lost it because you tried to take it before it was ever yours. A tear rolled down his cheek. I never even knew this existed. I know. Would you have warned me? I spent 7 years trying to. 3 days later, Tessa filed for divorce. Not because she suddenly found a conscience, because the investigations had frozen nearly every account connected to the case. The debts she'd hidden from Michael surfaced one after another. The speculative investments, the luxury loans, the forged financial disclosures. Michael discovered that almost every major financial decision during the previous 3 years had carried his signature, but her strategy. He accepted responsibility. He didn't argue. He didn't blame anyone. For the first time in years, he stopped looking for someone else to rescue him. Noah came to visit every Sunday. Nothing in the trust had ever changed that. One afternoon, he stood beside me in the garden we'd planted together years earlier. "Grandma, are you rich?" I laughed. "I've been comfortable." "Will I ever get any of it?" Children have a way of asking impossible questions with complete innocence. I smiled. "Maybe." "What do I have to do?" I handed him a packet of tomato seeds. "Grow into the kind of man who'd still visit me, even if I had nothing." He nodded immediately. "I'd still come." "I know." That answer mattered more than any number on a bank statement. 6 months later, I made one final change, not to punish anyone, not to reward anyone, to protect what mattered. Most of my estate would now fund scholarships for first-generation college students, support legal aid organizations defending vulnerable seniors, and maintain a charitable trust helping elderly homeowners facing financial exploitation. Noah remained a beneficiary, but only after he turned 35. Only after building a life of his own. Only after proving that what he valued most could never be measured by a bank balance. People still ask whether I forgave my son. Forgiveness is a strange thing. It isn't forgetting. It isn't pretending the wounds never happened. And it certainly isn't handing someone the knife a second time. I forgave Michael. Eventually. We have dinner together now. Sometimes Noah joins us. Sometimes he doesn't. Our conversations are quieter than they used to be, more careful. Perhaps that's what trust looks like after it's been broken. Not restored overnight, but rebuilt, one honest choice at a time. As for the river house, the locks are still the same. The herb garden still grows every spring. And every time I unlock the front door, I'm reminded of something money taught me far too late. The greatest inheritance you can leave your children isn't a house. It isn't a fortune. It's the character they must have before either of those things ever become theirs. So let me ask you something. If your own child tried to take everything you owned while you were still alive, and years later came back truly changed, would you welcome them home? Or would some doors, once locked, deserve to stay that way forever?